I was already thinking of doing a follow-up video for the $100 gaming PC I built recently after I finished editing and uploading it onto YouTube. But considering the reception of how much you guys watched it and, well, loved it, it would be a disservice if I decide not to follow up with, well, something. So without further ado, let's get to it with that extra $100 and this obligatory intro. The $100 hyper-budget gaming PC, all things considered, is a pretty powerful computer for the money thrown into it. The amount of games it can play while being as cheap as it is pretty nice. But what if we had a whole extra $100? Could we double our performance? Maybe. Perhaps we could make it more stable and give the system a boost while also allowing it to have a more elongated life to the very least. Let's look into it, and the parts I was able to get my hands on with the extra $100. Starting off with the most obvious and cheapest upgrade for our system, the RAM. It goes without saying, but having just an extra stick of 4 GB is going to go a long way in helping us use this PC to its fullest potential. And considering I was able to haggle half a dollar off the seller, bringing the total price to just $2.35 for this stick of RAM, I feel like even without the extra $100, that this is a no-brainer upgrade for anyone in a similar situation and build. Now that we are guaranteeing the system now has 16 gigs of RAM running at 1333 MHz in dual channel respectively, we should also consider upgrading our CPU to give it a slightly less narrow bottleneck. The i5-4570 in our system actually really isn't that bad. And if it were your $100 build with the extra $100 budget, I would tell you to save up for your new GPU and storage instead. But for the sake of our build, I would like to push it to its limits because, well, I want as much performance as possible for whatever games and other fun stuff we would love it to do. Now, I would love to throw in the i7-4790K and feel like a baller with such a legendary CPU, but I also don't want to eat up nearly our whole budget. So instead, I went for second place, which honestly might be for the best. I picked up this i7-4790 non-K for $30.55. It isn't the most significant upgrade to our system considering what CPU we already had, but it's literally right under that K variant and will definitely perform a lot better than the i5-4570 with the hyper-threading that we will now have access to. Also, the TDP is the same, 84 watts, which means the cooler we already have will do just fine. All it will need is a new dollop of thermal paste and bam! No excess money spent on a cooler. Nice. So, after all that, I want to look at our storage a little because the Toshiba Desk Star, or Death Star as it is called colloquially, as many of you commenters pointed out to me, while running now, alive, will bite the dust sooner or later. I wanted to get a 1TB SSD so that we could have a solid amount of storage, but there wasn't anything new or used that I felt comfortable buying, especially since I want to keep our savings for our GPU. While normally it wouldn't be the best idea, and I don't always recommend it, I decided to pick up this 1TB hard drive off Jawa.gg for just $14. While it is a used hard drive, which isn't typically a good idea, and it might say Dell, this isn't the worst drive all things considered. This is actually a Seagate drive, so despite it being used, these drives normally don't fail easily. Plus, for the price, and it being made a whole 6 years earlier when you really compare it to the Death Star, I think this is pretty reasonable for something that will hold a large library for us to shovel games, maybe some software onto for our whole system. Plus, we are tripling our storage, which, hey, that's a big deal here. Uh-oh. Well, unlike some tech channels, the glamorous ones that are really fun and in your face, I'm not going to hide any big mistakes. Even though it was $14 here, it was still a big mistake. Don't skip English class, kids, because reading is important, and I did not read. Also, get some good sleep. That's important. To be fair, I think I was like shopping for most of my parts in the late hours of the day before bed, but to keep it brief, and you can learn from this situation, this isn't a regular drive. I really should have just paid attention to the text that said Enterprise on the drive. I know better, but more importantly to the listing that clearly said Dell 1TB 7200 RPM 3.5-inch SAS, or Serial Attached SCSI, not what you give your mother when you think it isn't a big deal that you were failing your English class, is pretty similar infrastructure-wise to SATA, what we all are more familiar with. But as you can see, one of the main differences is the fact that the connectors are just a little different. And while you can get an adapter for this, I don't know if these older systems have the proper IOCs on board to process the data that would be technically different from its SATA counterparts. I admit that I'm a bit embarrassed that I made this mistake, but I know you guys will excuse it because, well, if you actually look a little, 1TB SATA hard drives can be found for nearly the same price easily, and in decent shape, might I add. So for the purpose of me not having to delay this video another month, let's just imagine none of this happened, and hey, maybe I will make a follow-up short testing a cheap adapter to see if this drive will be detectable and usable in this system. Sound like a deal, huh? You get content, I get to experiment, have the answer for you guys trying this at home, huh? Good. Alright, so after installing our 1TB hard drive, wink, I think it's time to put our final upgrade into the system. Thankfully, we were able to budget fairly well and are left with just shy of $55. So then, what do we go with? There's so many different options to choose from with a wad of cash like that. Well, let's just say I have some important things to say at the end of this video, but that for $50.29, I snagged this crazy deal for an RX 560 sorta in box. Crazily enough, this GPU comes in almost all of its original packaging, which is big news since it does include its driver CD, manual, and Molex PCIe power adapter. And that last part is a little important. You see, when it comes to getting a GPU for the system, we are limited in two ways: space and compatibility, but mostly compatibility. There is a reason we chose the FirePro W5100 after all. In a normal situation where you are building a PC from scratch, you will have PCIe power cables for your GPU, no problem. And even if you didn't have any spares, obviously you could use the Molex adapter we picked up with the GPU to alleviate the issue. But we have no Molex cables for our already limited power supply. So what do you do? Well, despite being $97.19 in the hole, we still have just enough money to go on to Amazon and purchase one of these. This SATA power to 6-pin PCIe power cable cost us only $1.70, which just barely keeps us in budget. There is a chance of it not working, but hey, let's live a little. Also, let's unplug the SATA power for our CD drive because we can't reach the GPU with the spare below it. It's not like we're going to use the thing anytime soon anyways, but yeah, sweet. All that is left is to set ourselves up, get a monitor, plug in a mouse, keyboard, and see if our system makes it through its boot cycles. So far, so good. And yes, looks like we made it. Awesome. I was actually a bit worried there. Let's move through our boot messages and BIOS stuff to install our new drivers and, well, get to gaming. Except our PC isn't moving along? What is going on? Why can't I install our GPU drivers? This app can't run on your PC. What do you mean? We have been able to do everything else before. Ah, wonderful. I am glad Windows is here to protect my PC. I guess I have flown too close to the sun on this one, but I am not giving up. In fact, I'm going to install custom drivers, RID, or NIMS. Oh, I think RID is down. Or perhaps they moved the website. Well, whatever. I'm going to get AMD's official stuff to work because the RX 500 series still receives support. I just gotta keep messing with it. Wait a minute. That's right, I have a driver CD. Wow, I am actually going to use the driver CD that came with our GPU to update our system. That does mean I'll have to move our SATA power cables around just a smidge in order to make this work, but hey, we haven't technically installed anything in our 1TB SATA hard drive yet. Plink. So yeah, let's go ahead and put in our CD and install our drivers from there. You know, I really wish I was making this up, but I guess our CD drive doesn't work. Like the light's flickering, but it just... Whatever, fine. I'll just pull it out and put it onto my own PC to burn the information off slowly and just throw it onto a USB and do this manually or whatever. Like I said, guys, I am not going to glamorize what could be a reality for some. Alright, after waiting like, a full Earth's rotation, I finally get to see if it was worth my time and if these drivers are new enough to make this all work. And they're not. Why does this have to be weird? And wait, couldn't I just technically grab the download off of my PC of the latest drivers and put it onto the USB and just install them that way? Well, I am out of options, so let's give it a go. After waiting only a tenth of an Earth's rotation, we can see if this works. And yeah, finally. Oh my god, why was that so complicated? Well, now that that is done, and, well, updated, time for some video games? Yeah, let's game. Now, what I would have loved to do was compare any frame data from the last video to what we have now to give you an idea of how much better our PC performs with all these upgrades to show you that this is what you should expect to see percentage-wise in terms of better performance. But if you remember from that video, I was having technical difficulties trying to set up and record frame data. So unless I want to cross-reference the only frame data I had, which was from my original Red Dead 2 benchmark, we won't get a whole lot of "look at these gains" moments. I mean, to be fair, just from looking at that data alone, we have a 10 FPS increase under the same settings, which, hey, depending on how we perceive this, it could mean that one game that is newer, that was borderline unplayable, becomes borderline playable. But at the same time, it might mean very little at the end of the day. Notably, Cyberpunk didn't really improve at all, and in some sections of the game, in this eyeballable frame data, it may have gotten worse? I don't know. But then the question becomes, is our system more stable? Is it better than it was before? I would say a bit, yes. And it may play more games with some settings enabled and whatnot. But what most people need to remember is what this whole PC technically is. It is a cheap, get-you-going sort of machine. It's cutthroat. It is the econobox that gets you from point A to point B, and sometimes C. We can rely on it for a lot, but not for everything we want to do. It is a cheap way to build a PC and get into the PC gaming sphere. On the flip side though, that doesn't mean we can't truly double our performance or get a powerhouse PC that will blow the socks off the original $100 budget. Like, for example, let's imagine we sold all of our parts that we weren't going to need anymore, and we wanted a true successor to the original $100 gaming PC. We could perhaps max out our RAM for the motherboard, add 1TB of SSD storage, and get a GTX 1060 with 6GB of VRAM to really make the most out of this unit. And then, later on, purchase an i7-4790 to tie the whole thing up. Overall, it would be under $300, or even be about $200 if we had made enough back from selling all of our parts we no longer were going to use. However, you still need to be careful doing this sort of thing. I know many of you were recently inspired by the original video and have been doing this yourself, but you can easily make mistakes like buying the wrong part and wasting your precious money just because either something doesn't fit or isn't compatible. In true Occam's razor fashion, the simplest answer is often the best. Which in this case is, if you're going to spend money on building a budget gaming PC, figure out your budget first, do a little research, and try to stick with it to the end. Because while it is fun, you don't want to spend more than you would have already when you could have spent what you should have to begin with. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. I really appreciate you guys having checked out the first video, and this one, of course. It is making me so motivated and excited to bring you guys more content as I move along here. I have a bunch of fun subjects to explore: parts, GPUs, builds, maybe a CPU or two, along with some motherboards, just all sorts of things. If you want to support me, you can become a member here on YouTube for just 99 cents a month. It goes a long way for me to produce my videos, but otherwise you can just subscribe if you want to show your support. It means a lot to me. Like this video if you liked it, join the Discord, follow me on Twitter, yada yada yada, and as always, thanks for watching.